Hello and welcome to Lexitecture, a podcast about word origins and histories. My name is Ryan, and in each episode my friend Amy and I bring a new pair of words to the show and talk about where they came from, how they got to where they are today, and any other interesting word nerd trivia that came up along the way. If that sounds like your cup of tea, come along for the ride with us and explore the weird and wonderful world of the English language. Today's episode, Inspiration Log.
Did you want to take it away this time? The people have been missing you.
Okay, well, far be it from me to upset the people.
The dozens of listeners that we have.
Literally dozens.
Yep.
Yeah. You know what? Dozens is good for me. I'm enjoying those dozens.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I take part in this podcast about words.
Really?
Yeah, so I figured that I might actually have to do some research in that general area.
Okay.
So because I love words, I have a million tons of books on my shelves that I could read or reread about exactly the sort of things that we talk about on this podcast. So I pulled one of these books off my shelves. It's called Foyle's Philavery. Now, I don't know if you pronounce it Philavery or Philavery.
Okay.
It's spelled Philavery. Okay, and
I like that.
It's a beautiful little hardback book with lovely sort of William Morris looking design on the cover, and it's basically a collection of beautiful words.
Oh, that's perfect.
Collected by Mr. Foyle, whose first name I forget. Mr. Foyle is from a literary dynasty of publishers or booksellers. I forget which one. There's a lot of things I forget, Ryan. However, he has put together this collection of beautiful words. And it was one of these words that inspired the choice that I've made for today. My word for today is, in fact, inspiration.
Ooh, I like that.
So, the word in question that first started me off thinking about this is a very unusual and quite lovely word, which I also am not 100% sure how to pronounce. Afflatus or afflatus? I think afflatus. Afflatus. And it is... Oh my God, what's the word I'm looking for? The meaning of the word?
Definition?
It is defined as, thank you. Oh my God, brain fart. Foyle defines it as inspiration, especially a divinely inspired creative impulse. The word is derived from Latin afflare, to breathe on, conjuring up a gloriously literal image for the ancient concept of divine inspiration. Now, divine inspiration, that was the part where I started to get interested. I had no idea that inspiration was so intimately linked to this idea of the divine. And so afflare, to breathe on, in other words, to be infused by the breath of God, or to be inspired, struck me as very beautiful. So I started to have a look at inspiration. I discovered that the word derives from Old French. The Old French root means breathing in. However, as early as 1300 in English, the word was defined as the influence of God.
Wow.
I then did, the influence of God. That comes first. That comes quite a long way first. So, spiro, the Latin root from which this word and many other words is derived, means I breathe.
Right.
And if you look up Webster's, it's websters1913.com that I'm looking at here, the first derivation of the word inspiration is given as the act of inspiring or breathing in, breath, specifically the drawing of air into the lungs, accomplished in mammals by elevation of the chest walls and flattening of the diaphragm, the opposite of expiration. Okay?
Right.
The second meaning is given as the act or power of exercising an elevating or stimulating influence upon the intellect or emotions, the result of such influence which quickens or stimulates, as the inspiration of occasion of art, etc. Mm-hmm. And Webster's gives the third definition as theological, a supernatural divine influence on the prophets, apostles, or sacred writers by which they were qualified to communicate moral or religious truth with authority. A supernatural influence which qualifies men and women to receive and communicate divine truth. Also, the truth communicated. And when I can find it, OED gives its first meaning as the process of being mentally stimulated to do or feel something, especially to do something creative. It then gives as number 2 the drawing in of breath and inhalation, and explains this Middle English in the sense divine guidance via Old Latin from Late Latin inspiratio, from the verb inspirare, to inspire. Now, there are a whole lot of Spiro words out there.
Right.
Inspiration, expiration. I have a further list and I've forgotten where I've put it.
Respiration.
Yes. And, oh no, I have in fact lost that list. I thought I had it here. But they all have that very mechanical, physiological breathe meaning.
Yeah.
You know, that's what's in there. What I found particularly interesting about inspiration is that very, very early 1300 example of the immediate influence of God or a god. This is from etymonline.com,
Mm-hmm.
especially that under which the holy books were written, and the same sort of thing. So what they say here, the sense evolution seems to be from breathe into to infuse animation or influence, thus affect, rouse, guide or control, especially by divine influence. Inspire, the verb in Middle English, also was used to mean breathe or put life or spirit into the human body, or to impart reason to a human soul. The literal sense of breathing dates from 1560.
Wow.
Much, much later than this wonderful, poetic, metaphorical, divine inspiration sense. I found that really, really interesting.
Yeah, that's...
A breath. Yeah. The thing that we do to stay alive. Now, I'm a yoga teacher. I am interested in breathing. You know, it's my bread and butter.
Right.
And I have made this connection between taking a deep breath and feeling inspired many, many times in my teaching, because it strikes me as, you know, there's something very, very satisfying about taking a proper, full, involved, deep breath.
Absolutely.
It almost makes you feel new, like suddenly your body is charged up with this power and ready to go. And I think when I start to get, you know, when I start to go all yoga about breathing, I come very close to that original 1300 meaning of feeling filled by something intangible, wonderful, and very, very powerful. The influence of, if you want to frame it in a Christian point of view, the influence of God. However, my next interesting date regarding this word, inspiration. So you've probably seen the sort of stuff that I'm talking about here. Inspirational quotes, for example, on Instagram and on Facebook.
Right.
Things that give you inspiration. You might describe a person as an inspiration, someone who is very accomplished or has succeeded or has done something that is remarkable.
Yeah.
However, it isn't until 1867 that meaning of the word inspiration is first recorded.
Wow, that's way late.
From our very workaday obvious, an inspiration is someone who inspires someone, or inspiration is a good idea or a little creative flutter. In fact, this is our third sense of the word. The breath came second. The first meaning was this notion that there is this intangible universal power that infuses us with life, infuses us with creativity, and infuses us with power. And that is why I've chosen to speak about inspiration.
That's fantastic. That's amazing that it took that long for it to get sort of so watered down.
Yeah.
I mean, it went even more because it went just sort of the basic mechanics from kind of the divine inspiration to the mechanics, and then back to just I saw a picture of a mountain with some words that someone said once in front of it, and now I feel better about my day. But that took a long time.
I also very much love the fact that an expiration can be an exhale, a breath out, but it can also be the end, the death of something.
Yeah.
I like the notion that each breath lives just for a moment, and once you breathe it out, it's gone. It has expired.
That's an interesting thought. I hadn't put those two together because I was thinking of it as like a binary interpretation of meaning. So it's, on the one hand, you've got inspiration, expiration, just breathing in, breathing out. On the other hand, you have the grander influence and influx of creativity and life and vitality. And then the expiration is just, that's the end of it, it's all final. But I hadn't conflated those two and shrunk them down so that each individual breath is kind of a life and death struggle in a bizarre and metaphorical way. That's kind of interesting.
I'm now clicking through the other pages that I had open that I'm actually bothering to look at now. And so in spiro, the Latin verb from that root spiro, I breathe, there are 4 different meanings given for the verb. This is on Wiktionary. And the first one is I breathe, or I breathe into, or I blow upon. The second is I inspire. Interesting. The third is I excite or inflame. And the fourth is I instill or implant. Yeah, so just a very whimsical, beautiful, and now quite watered down word.
Yeah, that's very cool. I like that a lot. Well, thank you. I am
quite
inspired.
Welcome. Thank you for listening.
So this has come up a lot with us, where one of us does a thing, and the other one comes to do their turn to do the thing, and they go, "Oh, well, I feel
like my thing is really crappy now."
Yeah. So I'm gonna bring us way down to earth because my word is log.
Okay.
And so, again, something that has come up in our discussions in the past has been this idea that at one point someone must have just made a noise, and the noise was distinctive enough and was contextual enough that it became a word.
Yes.
And so, and that just became the word for the thing. And there's plenty of examples of these ancient words that nobody can bother tracing back. You can find it in Sanskrit or Indo-European or Proto-Germanic or whatever what have you. But beyond that, it just became a thing.
Do you have one of those?
Well, this seems to be one of those, and this is the first time.
So exciting!
This is the first time that I can remember having found the OED to kind of identify that same idea, that notion that this is just.
I am currently ruffling pages.
It says, let's see here. The conjecture that the word is an adoption from the later stage of Scandinavian due to the Norwegian timber trade is not without plausibility, but is open to strong objections on phonological grounds. It is most likely that clog and log arose as attempts to express the notion of something massive by a word of appropriate sound.
Oh, it's the words that aren't onomatopoeic, but they kind of are.
Exactly. It's the word of onomatopoeia, but for a thing and for its nature rather than its
Ryan,
noise.
this is, how can you possibly think that this is not the thing? This is like paid out words.
This is perfect. So yeah, someone just on and so clog is basically almost a synonym for it. It's just another word that has become this just a big lump of something. There's a relation to I believe it was Norwegian word or Dutch word where log just means clumsy, heavy, or dull, just a thing, and it's related to the word lug in English. Oh, you big lug.
Ah, nice.
You big lump of whatever. You're just big and heavy and kind of either dumb or cuddly, depending on how affectionate you are towards the person you're calling a lug. But just this big sound. It reminds me of Douglas Adams in the Hitchhiker's Guide series where a whale is simply brought into existence by the infinite improbability drive, and he's sorting out what things are called. So he looks down and sees the ground and calls it ground because it's big and round. I'll call it the ground, and then he hits it.
Yeah, that's it.
But that idea. But apparently that's how we got the word log. What was interesting to me, because the one sense of log is just a big tree trunk, usually a fallen tree trunk, a big, heavy, immovable object. Mm-hmm. But of course, to log something, or you keep a log.
Yeah, sure.
A logbook. So it's like, well, where did that come from?
I've often wondered about that, to be honest. I've often wondered if it was to do with like the timber trade and keeping records or something like that. But yeah, the captain's log, stardate, whatever. You just use that word without really considering how it also means a lump of wood.
Well, not to worry, fearless co-host and tens of listeners. It's the closest and most appropriate use of it now, probably, other than the actual official use of like a logbook on a ship, would be a captain's log from Star Trek, because a log was an early, and adaptations of it, I believe, are probably still being used in certain senses and places, was an apparatus that was used by ships to measure the speed and progress of their travel. So
one wrote down what was going on with a log.
Exactly. So a log was just literally a chunk of wood that was weighted down with iron or something like that, but not enough that it sank, but that it was enough to resist being towed along, that it would just stay in one place. So they would drop it into the water. The log would stay there on the surface of the water, but where it was dropped. And then they would release a line that had sort of measured intervals marked on it, whether by knots or by markings or some other such technique. And at the same time that someone was letting the log out, there was another person with even originally just a sand, like an hourglass, a sand timer. And they would time a certain interval, and then they would haul the log back in and count the number of intervals that had been pulled along the line as the ship went along. And then they could determine the speed and the distance that they had traveled in that time. And then so they would write that down, and that became
the logbook.
The logbook. So the logbook eventually became all the ongoing kind of operational day-to-day logistical things on a ship, but primarily all surrounding the key information with navigation is where are we going and how fast are we getting there. And so that was the log. So then that's where logbook came from. And eventually shortened to log, and now log is just being used by drivers and everyone else, just people. Like live journal could have been just live log if it didn't sound so lumpy and clunky.
When you're in a boat too, where you're going and how fast you're getting there, those are the two things you need to know.
Absolutely, that's everything.
There's not much else going on there. You definitely want to write those things down. You definitely want a device that would help you to track that. That's amazing.
So that's where So
I'm
log.
also very much thinking of the log lady in Twin Peaks.
Yes. That's...
Never hear the word without thinking of that.
And the other sort of pop culture thing that pops into my head immediately is the song from Ren and Stimpy, where they...
I'm not hugely up on Ren and Stimpy.
They produced you can be forgiven for that for sure. But it was their kind of riffing on the Slinky. And so they had devised the jingle was what rolls downstairs a loner in pairs rolls over your neighbor's dog. It's great for a snack and fits on your back. It's log, log, log. So, but they had a whole commercial about it. It was anyway, that's the first thing that comes.
Do you know, Ryan,
mind.
that's taken up space in your brain that something else is not able to fit in for.
Yeah, and I will not let it go.
Well, yeah, I kind of feel the same. It's like who holds back the electric car, who makes Steve Gutenberg a star.
Exactly. You can't. Some things you just need to have.
You have them and you hang on to them even though they're dusty and old.
And it's Ren and Stimpy is an interesting thing because there are two things that I remember from Ren and Stimpy, and one of them is that, and the other one is the royal anthem of the Canadian, or the anthem of the Royal Canadian Kilted Yaksmen. song that they did, which was to the tune of God Save the Queen, which has ruined
any sporting event for you.
Or at least made very difficult attending, for instance, Remembrance Day ceremonies. When they play, which is one of the only times I hear God Save the Queen in a Canadian context, but it makes it very difficult for me because in my head, I am hearing the words of the anthem for the Royal Canadian Kilted Yaksmen, and it is just utterly and profoundly inappropriate.
What are the words? Come on.
It's our country reeks of trees. Our yaks are very large. Our country
reeks of cheese. Our yaks are really large.
And they smell like rotting beef carcasses. And it just goes on from there. And it's, and so there's me struggling. I mean, I'm hoping that what I'm conveying on the outside at these ceremonies is reverence to the point of trying to muffle emotions, but emotions of sadness and sobriety. When
and
really
not yak-related mirth.
I'm just desperately trying not to grin like an idiot at a Cenotaph Remembrance Day ceremony.
Crap.
It's right.
Billy Connolly does a wonderful bit about the British national anthem because it's dire. You know, it's just it needs to be turned up by at least another couple of hundred revs per minute.
Right.
You know, and what he had come up with a wonderful alternative. Now, there's a very, very, very long running British radio drama called The Archers. It's on BBC Radio 4.
Right.
And it has this. In fact, I recently heard it described as aggressively jaunty. This tune. And Billy Connolly was advocating that this should be the national anthem of Great Britain, and it goes da 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 da. It's very, very, very cheerful indeed.
That's fantastic.
But yeah, it would make Remembrance Day a whole lot different.
Even
without the Yaksmen.
Yes, it's like having yakety sax as your like "Here Comes the Bride" music at your wedding. You know, something like that. You get the Benny Hill theme song, and it's just nobody wins in that case, or everybody wins depending on who's there.
You know, hey Roger, what do you say?
Yes.
Very, very interesting. If you look up log in the alphabetical index, the first definition, the first alternative given is sailing aid.
Really?
Roger knows.
Oh, Roger knows
what I have just discovered. And if you follow it to the numbered section is 269 water travel. There are some incredibly wonderful words associated with the sea, are there not?
I'm excited. Yes, yeah, there are for sure.
So we have the good old fashioned. We just some of them are very straightforward, but also brilliant, like salty. A salty experience or a salty mariner.
Yeah.
Then you have things like sculling and helmsmanship. Binnacle. Oh, binnacle's a great word. And scull, punt, club haul, kedge, be caught amidships. There's just so many wonderful words related to the sea. Yeah, very, very interesting.
I like it because it's sort of its own world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where all often the language doesn't relate easily to other things. So there's a whole bunch of just terminology and slang that doesn't exist anywhere else, and it's all very new and exciting and interesting and exotic sounding.
Of course, and but there's also on the other side of that the fact that the maritime industry is so massive internationally that it's not like these words are dying out.
No, exactly, yeah.
We maintain that interest in them because the sea is so important to us as a species.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very cool.
The other synonyms given by Roger, so we've got sailing aid first, then fuel, as in to burn a log, I presume. Okay. Gauge, record or record, noun and verb, materials, and then computerize. So yeah, from a big heavy lug sort of thing to the thing that you do when you switch your computer on to log on. Yeah, and I presume that sense has come from this notion of the logbook and recording the things that happen.
Yeah, I would guess so.
Oh, that's just lovely. I like
Very
it a
cool.
lot.
Neat.
The Roger inspiration stuff is it's generally just a lot of words that I like a lot. So we have causation, influence, respiration, intuition, discovery, intelligence, imagination, spontaneity, inducement, contrivance, warm feeling, excitation, excitable state, revelation, and finally piety. So again, Roger is very much taken on that sense of the word that came last, but it does give a nod to piety, and inducement. So yeah, that sense does still exist. It's still out there,
and that's a pretty good example of when we first started doing the Hey Roger, the idea that some hapless individual would be looking for just a way to spice up their writing.
Yeah, indeed.
could potentially go from inspiration to piety, which when you're deep into the lore of this word, you kind of go, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But if you were to use that as just without further thought, it might be problematic.
Yeah.
But it is a good list of words.
A pious quote on Instagram isn't going to get so many likes, is it?
No, it's true, yeah. Well, that's it for another episode of Lexitecture. Thank you so much for listening, and if you want to get in touch with us, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Lexitecture, or follow us on Twitter at Lexitecture. You can also drop us a line at words@lexitecture.com. If you like the show, please give us a rating and review wherever you can to help more people know we're worth listening to. And be sure to tell all your word nerd friends about us too. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and you can find all our episodes on our website at lexitecture.com. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you again next week.